The biting December wind was my only companion as I stood on the worn porch swing that night, the cold seeping through the thin fabric of my threadbare jacket. My meagre duffel bag, packed in haste with the few items I deemed truly mine, a faded paperback, a crooked clay owl I'd made in art class, a handful of crumpled photos where my smile still felt genuine, lay slumped at my feet like a defeated soldier. The porch light above flickered, casting long, hungry shadows that danced menacingly around me, mirroring the fear gnawing at my gut. Inside, the warm glow of the living room spilled through the lace curtains, framing a scene that was as alien as it was agonizing. Robert and Catherine Vance, the two people who had raised me, who had promised me a home and unconditional love since I was a confused 6-year-old orphan, sat on the plush sofa. Their faces, usually composed and reserved, were etched with a strange relief, a brittle joy that hadn't been present in our home for years. Between them, nestled like a fragile porcelain doll, was a girl the spitting image of Catherine. Delicate features, hair like spun gold, and eyes the startling blue of a summer sky. Amelia, their real daughter, the daughter who had been abducted as a toddler and had now, against all odds, been found. Elise, Catherine's voice, usually a soft murmur, cut through the thin door, brittle and sharp like cracking ice. We've discussed this. It's for the best. Amelia needs to settle in. I could feel Robert's heavy gaze on me, not sympathetic, but stern, resolute. You're 18 now, Elise. You're an adult. It's time you made your own way. My own way? 18 years. 18 years of quiet obedience, of striving for good grades, of biting back sharp retorts and swallowing bitter disappointments, all to be good enough, to be worthy of their quiet affection. And now, in one breath, it was all erased, deemed insufficient. They hadn't even offered a car ride, just pointed to the bus stop 3 blocks away. A tear, cold and unwelcome, traced a path down my cheek, tasting of salt and betrayal. I scraped it away with the back of my hand, refusing to let them see me break. Not now. Not ever. The scent of pine and cinnamon drifted from inside, a festive overlay to the stench of dismissal. It was utterly surreal. The holidays just around the corner, and I was being cast out like refuse. The irony was a cruel twist in my gut. I gripped the strap of my duffel bag, the rough canvas digging into my palm. My voice, when it came, was a reedy whisper, thin from disuse, thick with a pain so profound it felt like I was being skinned alive. You're kicking me out. For her. Catherine sighed, a practiced sound of exasperation, not remorse. Don't be dramatic, Elise. You're a resilient girl. You'll land on your feet. She paused, then added, her voice softening just a fraction. We've left a small sum in your bank account, enough to get you started. Started where? On what? They didn't care. Their eyes were only for Amelia, their lost treasure now miraculously returned. Their joy eclipsed everything, including their former daughter, me. My father just pointed to the door. Their faces, previously rigid with the effort of telling me to leave, now softened into relief. They turned back to Amelia, a collective sigh escaping them as if a heavy burden had been lifted. The door clicked shut, the sound echoing in the sudden cavernous silence of the night. The porch light, perhaps in a final act of solidarity, flickered and died, plunging me into absolute darkness. I stood there for a long moment, the cold consuming me, not just from the wind, but from the hollow ache in my chest. The glow from their living room was the last thing I saw, a vibrant, warm splash of colour before my vision went blurry. My throat tightened, but I clamped my jaw shut. I wouldn't cry for them. They weren't worth it. Resilient girl, I muttered to the empty night. the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I'll land on my feet." The promise, whispered into the void, felt like a vow carved in stone. I adjusted the strap of my duffel, the weight on my shoulder a physical manifestation of the burden I now carried alone. The bus stop was indeed 3 blocks away, a cold, uninviting bench under a flickering street lamp. Every step I took away from that house felt like tearing a bandage off an old wound, fresh blood seeping out. Yet, with each step, a strange, fierce defiance began to spark within me. They didn't know it, but they had just unleashed a force they couldn't comprehend. They didn't know I was a lucky star, and my luck was just about to begin. The first few weeks were a brutal education in independence. The small sum Catherine mentioned was barely enough for a month's rent in a dingy, cockroach-infested studio apartment on the wrong side of town. The air in the apartment always smelled faintly of old cigarettes and desperation, a contrast to the lavender-scented laundry and polished wood floors I'd grown up with. My only furniture was a sagging sofa bed that groaned under my weight, and a wobbly plastic table I'd found abandoned on the curb. I took the first job I could get, bussing tables at a greasy spoon diner, the kind with sticky menus and lukewarm coffee. The clatter of plates, the shrill ring of the order bell, and the incessant chatter of frustrated cooks became the soundtrack to my new reality. My feet throbbed by the end of each shift, my uniform smelled of stale grease, and my mind was a fog of exhaustion. But something kept me going, a stubborn fire in my belly, fueled by the memory of the slamming dude's door a month ago. One Tuesday, my shift ended early, and as I walked home, my gaze fell upon a glittering scratch-off lottery ticket, lying discarded on the sidewalk. It was half hidden beneath a crushed soda can, an improbable fleck of metallic shimmer against the grey concrete. Usually I'd ignore such things, dismissing them as litter, but today a strange compulsion tugged at me. It felt like an invitation, a whisper in the wind. I bent down, plucked the crumpled ticket from its grimy resting place, and smoothed it out. It was a lucky 7S ticket, one of the cheaper ones. Back in my apartment, before collapsing onto my sofa bed, I found a forgotten quarter at the bottom of my duffel bag, the same bag that carried my entire life. Its cool metal felt strangely heavy in my fingers as I scratched away at the silver squares. One number revealed itself, a 7. Then another, 7. My breath hitched. With a trembling hand, I scratched the final square. Another, 7. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. 3 sevens. The prize printed below, $500. $500. My rent for next month was $450. It wasn't life-altering, but it felt like a miracle. It was as if the universe, having witnessed my unjust expulsion, decided to wink at me, to offer a small, tangible sign that I wasn't entirely alone. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Small, unexpected wins had always come my way, like finding a $20 bill on a particularly empty day, or narrowly avoiding a collision. But this felt different. It was a clear, undeniable sign. I was indeed a lucky star. That $500 didn't just pay my rent. It bought me a reprieve, a chance to breathe. I used a portion of the leftover cash to buy a small second-hand laptop from a pawn shop. It was bulky and slow, but it opened up a world of possibilities. I started looking into online courses, anything that could lift me out of the diner. I discovered a free coding bootcamp. It was intense, requiring hours of dedication after my diner shifts, but I devoured the material. My luck seemed to extend to my ability to grasp complex logic and syntax quickly. It felt like ideas clicked into place effortlessly, concepts unraveling before me with a clarity I hadn't known I possessed. 3 months later, a small, independent tech startup posted an internship opening for a junior developer. The requirements were steep, asking for experience I didn't technically have, but I applied anyway, driven by that same quiet, stubborn defiance. To my astonishment, the quirky founder, a brilliant but eccentric woman named Anya, saw something in my self-taught portfolio and my raw enthusiasm. She hired me. Leaving the diner was a bittersweet moment. I felt a surge of gratitude for the job that had kept me afloat, but a wave of exhilaration swept over me with the prospect of a brighter future. Anya's startup was chaotic, fueled by late-night coding sessions and copious amounts of bad coffee. But it was electric. I thrived. My lucky star continued to shine. I stumbled upon crucial debugging solutions others had missed, found elegant shortcuts in code, and my projects consistently impressed Anya. Within a year, I was promoted, my salary significantly higher, and I moved into a sunnier, smaller but far cleaner apartment in a quieter neighborhood. The air no longer smelled of desperation, but of possibility. It was roughly 2 years after I'd been kicked out, when my life had finally stabilized into a rhythm of satisfying work and quiet achievement, that the universe decided to bestow its greatest gift upon me. I was 20 now. My old duffel bag was long retired, replaced by a sleek laptop bag and a sensible handbag. My lunch breaks were no longer spent counting pennies, but exploring new cafes. On a particularly dreary Tuesday during one such lunch break, I decided on a whim to buy a lottery ticket from a small corner store near my office. Not a scratch-off this time, but a Powerball ticket. Something about the dull churn of the city, the grey skies, made me crave a splash of unpredictable colour. I chose numbers based on a random sequence that popped into my head my old house number, the day Anya hired me my lucky 7. That evening, exhausted after a particularly challenging bug fix, I scrolled through the news on my laptop, sipping lukewarm tea. A headline caught my eye. Local woman wins mega Powerball jackpot. My heart did a strange little flutter. I barely registered it until curiosity nudged me. I clicked the link and the winning numbers flashed across my screen. My tea mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the polished wood floor. The numbers. They were mine, every single one. 7, 22, 34, 42, 56, and the Powerball, 13. The jackpot was a staggering $92 million. My lucky star wasn't just a faint glimmer anymore. It was a supernova. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal consultations, financial advisors, and attempts to remain anonymous. I learned quickly that money brought a particular kind of attention, and discretion became my new mantra. I paid off my student loans, bought a small, elegant house with a sprawling garden that beckoned me to learn about flora, and diversified my investments. Anya, my former boss, was overjoyed when I quietly invested a significant sum in her startup, allowing her to expand into new markets. My act wasn't just generosity, it was strategic. I believed in her vision, and I believed in my own intuition when it came to investments. I didn't flaunt my wealth. I wasn't interested in extravagant displays. My revenge, if you could call it that, was quieter, more profound. It was the simple fact of my absolute independence, my success forged not out of their charity, but out of their cruelty. I was free, utterly, gloriously free and untouchable. Word of my good fortune inevitably reached the Vances. I learned this through a casual conversation with a former neighbour, Mrs. Henderson, whom I'd bumped into at a local farmer's market. Her eyes widened, a mixture of shock and awe when she saw me. She chattered incessantly about all the whispers and how the Vances were just beside themselves. According to her, they'd attempted to contact me, sending hesitant emails and even a letter. I'd instructed my assistant to filter all communications from them directly into a spam folder I never checked. Their attempts felt flimsy, desperate, like a spider trying to mend a web it had deliberately torn apart. I didn't care. Their voices were a static hum in the background of a life that was now vibrant and full. I travelled, explored new passions, supported charities I believed in, and continued dabbling in tech investments. My life was a tapestry of my own making, colourful and rich. Meanwhile, life for the Vances. From what I could glean from Mrs. Henderson's occasional updates was not so fortunate. Amelia had settled into their home, yes, but the initial euphoria had waned. The found daughter narrative had its charms, but Amelia, it seemed, was not the idealized child they had imagined. She struggled with lingering trauma from her abduction, suffered from anxiety, and generally found it difficult to assimilate into a life she remembered nothing about. Mrs. Henderson hinted at frequent arguments, a strained atmosphere. Then came the bigger blow. A year after my lottery win, a whispered rumour about Amelia's health began to circulate. Mrs. Henderson, her face creased with concern, cornered me again. "Elise, dear, have you heard? Poor Amelia, she's quite ill. A rare autoimmune condition, they say. Catherine looks 10 years older." My initial reaction was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Not sympathy, not exactly, but a profound sense of grim inevitability. It felt like a consequence, an unforgiving hand of fate. I pushed the thought away, focusing on my flourishing garden. Focus on the roses, Elise, I told myself, not the withered weeds in someone else's yard. Months passed. The whispers grew louder, more urgent. Amelia's condition worsened. The rare autoimmune disease progressed relentlessly, requiring expensive treatments, experimental therapies. The Vances, despite their comfortable lifestyle, were not wealthy enough to sustain the kind of medical care Amelia now needed. Robert's law practice was solid, but not limitless. Catherine's occasional real estate ventures weren't enough. They started selling assets, a vacation home, Catherine's antique jewellery, Robert's prized vintage car. Their once pristine house began to show signs of neglect, the garden overgrown, the paint peeling. The vibrant glow I remembered had faded into a dull, desperate flicker. One crisp autumn afternoon, a distinct prickle of unease settled on my skin as I glanced out my kitchen window. A sleek black sedan was parked discreetly down the street, almost hidden by the ancient oak tree. It had been there, on and off for a few days. My security system was top-notch, my privacy meticulously guarded, yet an unnerving certainty began to form. They were watching me. It wasn't a surprise. I knew this moment was coming. A week later, the doorbell, a charming chime I'd chosen for its melodic quality, rang. My assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara, had just left for the day. I was alone, curled up with a book, the scent of fresh baked bread lingering in the air. I hesitated, then walked to the monitor. The image on the screen made my breath catch. It was Catherine and Robert Vance. They looked utterly ravaged, like haggard apparitions from many sleepless nights. Catherine's usually perfect blonde hair was streaked with grey, pulled back carelessly from a face that was thin and haggard, etched with lines of worry and exhaustion. Her fine clothes were rumpled, her eyes sunken and desperate. Robert stood beside her, stooped, his shoulders slumped as if under an unbearable weight. His once impeccable suit was ill-fitting, his features drawn. The confident, imposing man who had dismissed me with a wave of his hand was gone, replaced by a ghost. My heart thrummed a chaotic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The moment I had both dreaded and, in the darkest, most secret corner of my heart, anticipated. My hands, usually steady, trembled slightly as I pressed the intercom button. "Elise?" Catherine's voice, raspy and thin, crackled through the speaker. "Please, Elise, we need to talk." I considered ignoring them, letting them stand out there until they gave up, just as they had given up on me. But a stronger impulse took hold. This wasn't about avoiding confrontation anymore. It was about facing it on my terms. I pressed the button that unlocked the gate, then the front door. The click echoed through the silent house. I watched them approach the front door, their steps slow, hesitant, like supplicants approaching a temple. I stood in the entryway, bathed in the soft glow of the overhead pendant light, wearing a simple silk house dress, my bare feet cooled against the polished wood. I was completely at ease, outwardly calm, every nerve strung taut beneath. They stepped inside, their eyes darting around my spacious, beautifully appointed home, the original artwork on the walls, the flourishing indoor plants, the elegant furniture that spoke of comfort and understated luxury. It was a stark contrast to the decay they lived in, a testament to what my kicking out had led to. "Elise," Robert began, his voice hoarse, clearing his throat. He looked directly at me, and I saw a flicker of the old sternness in his eyes, quickly subsumed by a plea. "You look, well." "I am," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "What brings you here?" Catherine wrung her hands, clasping and unclasping them. Her gaze was frantic, darting from my face to the grand staircase, to the gleaming kitchen beyond. "Elise, we need your help." "Help?" I raised an eyebrow, a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of my head. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. "That's an interesting choice of word." "It's Amelia," Robert interjected, stepping forward, his hands clasped before him like a penitent. "Her condition, it's worsened considerably. The doctors are saying they're running out of options. There's a new experimental treatment in Switzerland, but it's astronomically expensive. We've exhausted everything, Elise, everything we have." Silence descended, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator in the distant kitchen, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. I gazed at them, really saw them, stripped of their veneer of self-importance and detached civility. They were broken, their pride shattered, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. "I see," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. I walked slowly towards them, my steps measured, deliberate. They flinched, almost imperceptibly, as I approached. "So, you've come to me. The girl you threw out. The girl you told to make her own way. The girl who was dramatic for feeling abandoned." Catherine let out a small, choked sob. "Elise, please, we know we made mistakes, terrible mistakes. We were blinded by our grief, by the joy of finding Amelia. We weren't thinking straight. We beg you, as the daughter we raised, please, we need you." The daughter they raised. The words echoed in my mind, hollow and meaningless. They recognized me as a daughter only when they needed something, only when their own blood was failing. My lucky star, which had guided me through the darkness they had plunged me into, now shone with a cruel, cold brilliance. My gaze drifted to a small framed photo on a side table, a candid shot of me laughing with Anya, my mentor and friend, at the launch party for our latest successful project. My family, I thought. My chosen family. "You're right," I said, my voice cutting through Catherine's pleas, sharp and clear. "You did make mistakes, but they weren't just mistakes, were they? They were choices. Deliberate choices. You chose to remove me from your life the moment someone you deemed more worthy appeared." I paused, letting my words sink in, watching their faces crumple further. "You chose to tell an 18-year-old girl with no safety net, no family, no real resources, that she was on her own. You chose to prioritize blood over bond and self-interest over a promise you made to an orphaned child. Robert finally looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw genuine regret, mixed with a desperate hope. We are genuinely sorry, Elise, truly. What we did was unforgivable. But Amelia, she's innocent in all of this. She's a good girl. She doesn't deserve this. No, I agreed, a flicker of something close to compassion, or perhaps just weariness, stirring within me. She doesn't. Just as I didn't deserve to be cast out onto the street, just as I was an innocent in all of your choices. I took a deep breath. The scent of the living room, a blend of expensive wood polish and fresh flowers, filling my lungs. Do you remember that night? The cold, the way the porch light flickered and died, the way the door closed decisively, sealing away the last shred of warmth I had ever known. Catherine choked back another sob, her face wet with tears. Elise, don't. Please. No, I repeated, my voice gaining strength, resonating through the silent house. I will, because I remember every detail. I remember every night I slept on that lumpy sofa bed, every plate I bust, every late hour I spent hunched over a second-hand laptop, clawing my way back from the abyss you condemned me to. I met Robert's haunted gaze, then Catherine's desperate one. And you want my help now, because your own luck has run out. Because your real daughter, the one you chose over me, is suffering, and you can't fix it anymore. My lucky star had guided me, yes, but it had also, in a way, been a mirror reflecting the choices people made around me. Their choices had led them here. My choices and my luck had led me to this opulent hallway, standing before them as the arbiter of their fate. I walked to the front door, my back to them, and placed my hand on the cool brass handle. I could feel their desperate eyes on me, their silent pleas like a physical weight. Do you know what I learned that night you kicked me out? I continued, my voice low, steady, a quiet force. I learned that dependence is a cage, that the love you offer can be conditional, transactional, that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. I turned back to face them, my face perfectly neutral, masking the complex tempest raging beneath. And I learned that I was always meant to stand on my own, to build my own life, to forge my own destiny, unburdened by your expectations, and certainly unburdened by your pity now. I paused for a beat, letting the full weight of my words settle. Then I extended my arm, my hand gesturing towards the open doorway, towards the setting sun casting long, cold shadows across my manicured lawn. You showed me the door once, I said, my voice hardening, echoing the finality that had characterized their actions that night. Now, I'm showing you yours. Catherine gasped, a sharp, ragged sound. Robert's face, already pale, seemed to drain of all remaining colour. They stood frozen for a moment, their eyes wide with disbelief, with the crushing realization of their utter helplessness. They had come begging for mercy, for a lifeline, and I had simply cut the rope. But Elise, Robert whispered, his voice broken. Amelia, she will die without this treatment. Please, you have the means. It's millions. You won the lottery. You can save her. I can, I conceded, my gaze unwavering. But I won't. Just as you could have offered me a place, offered me support, offered me love that wasn't conditional on another person's absence, and you didn't. You made your choice. You chose to lose one daughter, and now you are going to lose your other real daughter. And now I'm making mine. Their hopes, which had flickered briefly in my presence, were now completely extinguished. The defeat in their eyes was absolute, profound. They were two elderly figures, diminished, broken, standing in the opulent hallway of a woman they had cast aside. Slowly, painfully, they turned. They walked towards the open door, each step heavy, laden with the weight of their despair and their past actions. As they crossed the threshold, I remembered the way they had turned their backs on me, their relief palpable as the door clicked behind me. This time, I didn't slam the door. I simply stood there, watching as they descended the steps, their figures silhouetted against the encroaching twilight. They eventually reached their car, a newer model, but probably their last remaining significant asset. They got in, and the sedan pulled away, shrinking into the distance until it was just a faint speck on the horizon. I closed the door silently, the soft click resonating through the house. The silence that followed was profound, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with a sense of peace, a vast, quiet validation. My heart, which had been a drumbeat of anticipation and pain for so long, finally settled into a calm, steady rhythm. My lucky star hadn't just brought me wealth, it had brought me freedom, and, in this moment, a profound, undeniable sense of justice. They hadn't known what kind of power they possessed when they dismissed me. But I knew. I had always been, and would always be, a lucky star. And now, finally, they too had learned that truth, the hard way.